a unicorn.
I don't know how I originally ended up in Equestria. That's where I live. But that's what happened when I disappeared from this world.
So, what you've been hiding all this time is that you're a unicorn.
I used to be. Hadn't even know I was actually human up until less than a month ago, actually. I'd been researching humans my entire life, but Princess Celestia told me they were real and that you still lived here.
No, just stop talking.
You wanted me to tell the truth.
Of course, I do want the truth. You've mentioned a few things about where you came from, and I don't think you were talking about unicorns. Like, you mentioned your mother worked for a weather station?
Well, she's not a unicorn. She's a Pegasus. And she worked for a weather factory in Cloudsdale, specializing in rain cloud production.
No, that's ridiculous. Are you saying that you've just been giving me straight lies this entire time?
I didn't lie. I didn't tell you the entire truth, but I haven't lied to you.
Lyra glanced down at her necklace and held it out so that Audrey could see the lyre-shaped charm.
See? This was a gift from the princess before I came here.
What? Are you gonna say it's magic or something?
No, that's not how magic works. I can't even do anything without a horn. I lost it when I became a human. Not that I really mind, since I have these.
You're sounding crazy right now. Do you realize that?
I know it's a lot to accept. That's why I never mentioned it before. Besides, I don't want to go back to Equestria. I want to meet my real parents. My human parents.
So, the reason you haven't told me anything is because you're a unicorn trying to fit into human society.
Exactly.
You actually believe this?
Of course. I haven't been in the human world very long. I'm still adjusting to it. When I first got here, I was overwhelmed. Des Moines is just so much bigger than Ponyville.
Ponyville?
Yeah, that's where I used to live.
That's... You know what? Never mind.
You're the first human friend I've ever had. Up until I met you, humans seemed so distant. I didn't even think of them as being much like myself, I guess. But you showed me what we're all like. You taught me so much. I don't know what I would have done without your help.
You were a unicorn up until I met you.
That was the day I left home. You believe me then?
Of course not. All this stuff about unicorns, it doesn't make any sense. I shouldn't even have to say this, but unicorns aren't real, Lyra. Unicorns aren't real, Lyra. Unicorns aren't real, Lyra. Unicorns aren't real, Lyra.
You're just like Bonbon.
Who?
My old roommate. She never believed me either.
Exactly! If she didn't believe you about unicorns, what makes you think I would?
No! She doesn't believe in humans. Ponies think that we're just made-up creatures from old stories. Most of them haven't even heard of us. Even when there is so much proof that humans were real, all around us. Even before I knew what I was.
Lyra, I'll admit that this is one heck of a story. It almost makes sense that your dad would be a writer. You're definitely good at making things up. Except, you still believe everything you're saying, don't you?
Of course! The problem is just that I don't have any proof. Even then, would it make any difference? Bonbon's mind would have never changed no matter how much evidence I found. And I was right in the end. Princess Celestia had admitted to all my suspicions. And now I'm here with a living human. I never thought I'd have to convince a human that unicorns were real.
Oh, trust me. I never expected to have this conversation either. Please, don't mention any of this to my parents.
I didn't plan on it. I just want to be a human. I didn't even want to tell you any of this in the first place.
Good, because they like you, Lyra. They let you stay here a lot longer than I ever expected them to. If you start saying stuff about being a unicorn in Ponyland or whatever, though...
Ponyville.
Whatever. The point is, they're going to think you're crazy. And they'd be right.
Why did I say anything? I should have known this would happen. The human world really isn't different from Equestria, is it? Fine.
We'll get in touch with your parents, find out if they really are your parents, I think it would be best for you if you just have a permanent place to stay so that you can get back in touch with reality.
Just one thing. You know what unicorns are, right?
Of course, but I don't see...
How do you know what they are?
Well, there's stories about them, but they're all fantasy. They're just made up. Lyra, if this is about what your dad writes, he would probably be the first to tell you it's all...
We had a few stories about humans in Equestria. Not very many, but they were there if you looked for them. And that's because humans exist, and all those stories were based on fact.
That probably sounds like a logical argument to you, but it really doesn't hold any ground.
I don't know much about what our worlds have in common, but there are so many things I've noticed that line up. We even know what France is in Equestria, even though most ponies don't realize it's a real place. They'd hardly believe that I'd gone there.
When did you go to France? You're from Pennsylvania. Or at least we think you are.
But you told me Des Moines was French.
We're in America. There are plenty of foreign words here.
Wait, but I've never heard of America before. That wasn't in any of the equestrian histories I read.
You've never heard of America? Lyra, you're really going to need to get help. Look, I'll figure out how to get in touch with your dad. You just... I don't know. Let me handle this.
Lyra returned to the guest bedroom, collapsed on the bed, and stared up at the ceiling.
Initially, I never planned on telling any humans about Equestria. There are a number of reasons for that. I wanted to fit in. Like, I'd always been a part of this world instead of having been yanked out of it all those years ago. I also didn't want to have to explain that where I came from, the species that covered the world had caused its own extinction. And there's also the fact that I have no proof that the other world existed, and humans would likely call me crazy for suggesting it. And sure enough, I was right. Audrey didn't even believe in unicorns. This is too much like what had happened during my last week in Ponyville. Bonbon thought I was crazy and wanted me to drop the whole human thing, so I had to shut up about it. It did calm things down, but it had been hard. The evidence was everywhere in Equestria, and of course it was. Humans had lived there once. They left their inventions, and then they'd gone extinct. I still haven't mentioned that part to Audrey. That war was even harder to think about now that I've considered myself more human than pony. Then again, my life in Equestria feels like another life, but at the same time, it seems like I had only just been there yesterday. I'm so used to sitting down to dinner every night with Audrey and her family, but when I thought about staying in this house with creatures that I had worked so hard simply to prove the existence of, it's still amazing. They'd all gone their whole lives without seeing unicorns, though. And whatever these ponies I saw weeks ago were, they were nothing like the ones in Equestria. They didn't even talk to me.
Lyra idly inspected her fingers.
I can always do what I did with Bonbon that final week. If I don't mention unicorns, maybe I can convince Audrey I'm over with it, that I'm not crazy. I know even less about this world than I thought I did. I've been in some place called America all this time, and judging by Audrey's reaction, France is still real, but I have no idea exactly how far away it is. It didn't sound like it was anywhere close. What am I supposed to tell my real family?
Audrey found her dad working in the living room at his laptop. She approached him slowly.
This has to be handled delicately. Hey, Dad?
Yes?
I know it's kind of out of nowhere, but we found Lyra's parents.
You're sure?
Audrey nodded. She went on to explain everything about how one of Lyra's friends from the band had recognized her dad, the news articles they'd found. The entire story, excluding the conversation that she just had with Lyra. The story was insane enough already without her help.
I'm not sure how nobody figured it out before. Thomas Michaelakos? Ever heard of him? I guess he's fairly popular.
I don't recognize the name, but you're sure it's him? I don't see how nobody would have...
Why they didn't recognize him? I don't know either. But the picture matched up, and there were news stories about her disappearance that matched her age. I don't think we can really say anything for sure, but it seems very likely.
Let me see it before we make any decisions. And she hasn't said anything about where she's been?
Yeah, she wasn't kidnapped at all. She's been living in a magical land with the unicorns. No worries there. Everything was all sunshine and rainbows. No, still nothing. I think that something might have happened to her, like...
And Lyra still won't say anything. You showed her what you found, right?
Of course. She said she didn't remember anything about it.
But Audrey...
Yes?
If this doesn't turn out to be her family, we'll need to do something about Lyra. She's a good kid, but she can't stay here much longer.
I know that.
I just need to finish this up, and I'll be up there to look at what you found.
She headed back upstairs to wait. The light from the computer screen shined in Audrey's face in the dark room. It was late at night. Her mom had checked out what they'd found too. She'd heard of the book series Lyra's dad wrote, though she'd never read any of them herself. High fantasy wasn't her preference, but everything about that story of Lyra Michaelakos' disappearance 15 years ago seemed to line up. Now it was just a matter of getting in touch. Lyra had told her to handle it, since she had no idea what email even was.
Why did Lyra have to go and make things so much more complicated, though? Lyra had actually been getting better up until now. The first time I had met her, Lyra was completely hopeless, a total wreck. It had just been my attempt at a good deed, letting her stay here for a few days, that had turned into weeks. But a girl like that, obviously a runaway, alone in a moderately big city, that was asking for trouble. Who knew where Lyra would be now if I hadn't stepped in? If she'd even be alive? That might be pushing it, actually, but not impossible. It was hard enough to convince my parents that this random green-haired stranger who occasionally tried to eat flowers wasn't a total lunatic. They would not hear anything about unicorns. I'll have to make sure of that. The more of this that I could convince them to let me handle on my own, the better. Asking about Lyra's past straight out didn't get me far at first. I thought maybe building some trust could get her talking. And that it did. So Lyra thought she had come from Ponyville. Creative name, must have spent a long time on that one. And that she'd been a unicorn. And now, she'd been turned into a human by a magic princess and was trying to fit into human society. There are worse delusions for sure, more dangerous ones, but that was a doozy. My first suspicions of child abuse can't completely be counted out. If anything, it seems more likely, assuming she was Lyra Michaelakos. There was enough to indicate that, and she'd been kidnapped as an infant. Who knew where she'd been? She was blocking out the memories. She must be. Something in her behavior when she opened up about her little secret said that she believed every word that was coming out of her mouth. When we first met, I thought Lyra was interesting. Yeah, she's interesting, all right. Ugh. The sooner I'm done with this, the better.
Audrey tapped the spacebar impatiently to wake her computer up. She opened up the browser and went back to Thomas Michaelakos' official website. The page was just a flashy ad for his book series. The guy had built his fortune off of fantasy worlds, and Lyra thought she had come from one.
Is this really the place to send her, even if it was her real family? On one hand, she acted like she didn't want to be a unicorn. Considering whatever those years in Ponyville had actually been, it made sense that she would want to get away from that. Her goal was to find her parents and become a normal human. It didn't sound too harmful. And on the other hand, she thought she was a unicorn. Of all things, a unicorn. What was the proper response to that anyway? Lyra needs help. As long as her delusions aren't dangerous, therapy, medication, probably expensive stuff. Sending her halfway across the country might not be the best thing right now, but it's not like my family could provide any help. And now Lyra had her own family to take care of, assuming she could reach them.
It took a lot of digging through the site, but Audrey finally found a link on the page to the author's email. Probably just for fan letters and that sort of thing, but there was no other way to get in touch. Her parents had discussed this with her, what she should do, and what she should tell him. She spent a good few minutes typing out a message, and read it over a few times. She didn't exactly want it to sound like a school paper. Was it too formal? Not enough? She tried to phase the part of Lyra's issues mildly. If she sounded too crazy, that could threaten the one part of the story that actually might be true.
Mr. Michaelakos, my name is Audrey Loren. I'm 16 years old and I live in Des Moines, Iowa. Several years ago, I met a girl my age passing through town who called herself Lyra. She's currently staying in my home and working as an amateur musician. She has no known last name and says she was searching for her birth parents after discovering that she was adopted. It wasn't until very recently that we identified you and your wife in the photograph Lyra carried with her. She's never heard of you, but her name and age match those of your missing daughter. Lyra refuses to tell me anything truthful about her past or who her former caretakers were. She seems to be suffering from delusions and may need medication or professional help.
Audrey paused at that part. At the moment, it would be best not to mention just how severe those delusions were. This guy's daughter had been abducted and he hadn't seen her in years. There was no way to fit in, by the way, she told me she was a unicorn, and not have it sound like a cruel joke.
I understand that when your daughter went missing 15 years ago, several objects were stolen. If this photograph is one of them, I see no other way she could have obtained it. Please respond.
Attached to the message was a photo she'd taken of Lyra's picture frame. Audrey didn't have a scanner, and besides, the frame might help identify it, prove that the picture hadn't been copied. She also included a picture of Lyra herself.
Oh, I really hope you actually check this thing.
It had been a few days since they'd found her parents. Lyra was starting to get uncomfortable in this house. At the moment, she was just sitting on her bed with her guitar, not playing it. She hadn't even plugged it in. She was starting to spend a lot of time alone, just thinking. Audrey's parents had started asking her what she remembered about her adopted family, and Lyra had noticed Audrey's face whenever they brought it up. She hadn't said anything about Equestria since their conversation. Audrey had practically begged her not to. They were still being hospitable, though, but the questions had started again. Lyra just wanted to get back to Philadelphia, she corrected herself, and live the normal human life she'd been dreaming of. She had been pretending that was what she'd had here, but really she had been an outsider for the past few weeks. Now she finally had solid ties to the human world.
Well, maybe. They still haven't...
I got a reply back.
She stared up at Audrey, who had just stepped into the doorway. Something about her facial expression said that things weren't going as planned.
From my dad? What did he say?
Well, first off, he's not entirely convinced that you're his daughter.
What? But everything on your computer said...
They'd been searching for you for years after your disappearance. Obviously, they wanted their daughter back, but eventually they gave up any hope that you were still alive. But you're not the first person who's claimed to be Lyra Michaelakos.
You mean somebody pretended to be me? Why?
He's got a missing daughter and a lot of money. You do the math. He doesn't want to put his family under too much strain. But he was interested in the picture. Nothing from your disappearance was ever recovered, but he said that picture was one of the things missing.
See? I told you. That should prove everything, right?
Nothing can really be taken for granted until they get a DNA test, but first he wants to talk to you. He gave me a phone number.
A phone number? So I can talk to him with that, right?
That's kind of what it's for, yeah. Just don't say anything crazy to him, alright?
You mean about a
Yes, that. Nothing about that.
No, of course not. I'm not a unicorn. I was kidding. That's all.
So, are you going to tell your family where you've been for the past 15 years? I'm sure they'd like to know.
Well...
Whatever you decide to tell them, just remember that you're still on thin ice. The last thing you need is for them to think that you're just trying to take advantage of them.
I'd never do that.
Lyra, in spite of everything, I still trust you. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe you are crazy. This is the number he sent me. All you can do right now is talk to him.
The phone was in one hand, and the slip of paper was in the other. Lyra thought she remembered how to enter the code onto the device. The operation had been pretty straightforward. Still, it was only her second time ever talking on a phone, and the last time had been a while ago. Not to mention, she'd be talking to her dad for the first time ever. She took a deep breath. She'd been watching the family relations between Audrey and her parents. They got along well for the most part. But Audrey had always been a human, and had known them her whole life. This human, and that was part of it, he was a human, was like a total stranger to her. She hadn't felt this way about talking to a human since the first time she'd met one. Lyra gritted her teeth and punched in each number.
Hi? Hello? Is anybody...
Hello? Who is this?
My name is Lyra. Are you Thomas Michaelakos?
Yes. I read the email about you.
Oh, you did?
Your friend told me.
Audrey? Yeah, she sent the letter. I don't know how to use a computer.
How long have you had that photograph?
Ever since I was young. I never knew who you were. Another friend of mine read your books. He told me about your books, the ones about magic.
Lyra, where have you been all these years?
That question had been inevitable. It was only right for him to want to know, and yet he probably wouldn't even believe her. And if her family, her only solid connection to this world, and her only permanent home, if they abandoned her, she'd have nothing. She remembered the night that Dewey had shown her that picture. It was one of her final nights in Equestria. After seeing those humans, not even knowing who they were, staying in Equestria didn't seem like an option. And now she was talking to the man from her picture. If she wanted to live there, in Pennsylvania, then it was best to put Equestria in the past. Permanently.
To tell the truth, I don't remember what happened to me.
The email said you were confused about it.
Yeah, it's all kind of a blur.
Are you alright?
Of course, nothing bad happened to me, but I don't remember very much from before I came to Des Moines. Audrey and her family took me in for a while. Before that, I don't remember how I got here.
It sounded weak, she realized that. She just didn't know enough about the human world to come up with a convincing lie, even though she'd been pondering it over the past few days. She didn't even know what America was like, even if she was right in the middle of it.
You don't remember anything?
I wish I did.
Her legs moved restlessly. The strangest thing about talking on the phone was that you couldn't see the other human, what they were doing, what they looked like. That was only making it harder to talk to her father.
So, green hair, huh?
What? How does he know?
Your friend Audrey sent me a picture of you. You aren't what I expected, to say the least.
Yeah, I guess not.
The other humans all thought she dyed her hair. She actually didn't know what color hair she was supposed to have. Green obviously wasn't what she'd been born with. Her parents would know, but not her.
And you're a musician? Am I remembering this right?
Yeah, guitar mostly. I saw you write books about magic.
Yes, I suppose you could say that. But there's much more to fantasy these days than just magic.
I'm not really interested in that.
You might be the odd one out then. My wife does artwork. A lot of it is for my books. And your sister, well, she's...
What's her name?
It's Chloe.
I'd like to meet her.
I haven't told either about you yet. It's just... Lyra, I really would like to trust you, but we can't be too careful. You're not lying about where you got that picture?
Of course not. I really have had it ever since I can remember.
You said you didn't remember anything.
Well, not everything, but that picture, I've definitely had it. For a few weeks, for years. Well, Dewey had kept it for years, and where else would he have gotten a photograph of humans? Besides, it wasn't like they were going to tell me the truth. Up until the end, they just wanted me to be a regular unicorn. Hadn't they realized that would have been impossible?
If you could just tell me what happened, where you'd gone after. Well...
I can't. I'm sorry.
Would you be able to come here? To Pennsylvania?
Huh? I think so. You mean you do trust me?
I may be getting my hopes up.
I really don't have anywhere else to go. Thank you so much.
One final thing. Would I be able to talk to the family you're staying with?
Sure. I'll go find somebody. Do I just give the phone to them? I'm sorry, I'm new at this.
That's fine.
She lowered the phone from her ear. She supposed she could walk around with it until she found one of Audrey's parents. There seemed to be a certain etiquette humans followed when using these that she'd observed, but never understood. But, more importantly,
I'm finally going home.